said before the break, China emits more carbon dioxide every 16 days than Australia emits in an entire year. That's according to new data. Research published by the Institute of Public Affairs says China's coal use is skyrocketing while Australia's carbon emissions per person have declined. To discuss this and more, I'm joined now from Melbourne by the Head of Research at the IPA, Daniel Wild. Tell you what, Daniel, thank God for the IPA. I mean, these are exactly the sort of hard facts that have gone missing in the whole climate debate. Let me put it in black and white for viewers at home. This is out of your own data set. It says that Australia's carbon emissions per person have declined 15.4% since 2004, whereas China's carbon emissions per person have increased by 83.5% over the same period. And here's the most important stat, I reckon. China is currently constructing 92 coal-fired power stations with a further 135 in the pre-construction phase. Right here in Australia, we can't even build one. And the only time we do talk about coal-fired power, it's about closures, not new coal-fired power capacity. This isn't about climate change anymore, Daniel Wild. It's about the West de-industrialising itself against a big threat like China, and that's the worry.
That's exactly right, Peter. And what it's also about is managed decline that is taking place at the hands of Australia's elites and our political class. We know that despite all of those figures that you just ran through there, Peter, with the emissions, we're also going to have significant job losses that will take place as a result of policies such as a net zero emissions policy. So modelling we had prepared a couple of weeks earlier estimated that up to 653,000 jobs would be lost under a net zero emissions target, that those job losses would be concentrated in regional Australia and in industries such as agriculture, manufacturing and coal mining. So it's all pain and no gain. But the other issue here is those that are pushing for emissions reduction policies are those in the inner city suburbs of Melbourne, of Sydney and of Brisbane, who are largely protected from the negative economic, social and humanitarian consequences that result from the job losses from a net zero emissions target. Instead, those consequences are pushed out to Australians in the outer suburbs and the regions. And I've got to say, it is very confusing for the coalition to be pushing a net zero emissions policy when it's those people, those voters that got them into government, the voters that swung to them in regional Queensland, that are going to be the ones that are going to be hit hardest by that very policy.
Well, and I'll give you a prediction. It'll be a bloodbath in WA for the Liberal Party. I wouldn't mind betting that the National Party could end up being the major opposition force over there. There's no way either will be government, and it's just another demonstration when the Liberal Party tries to outflank Labor on environmental and green issues, and federal election results are there as proof as well. They are absolutely punished by the electorate. And when we talk about net zero, it's the countries around the world that didn't meet Kyoto, that are not meeting their 2020 targets. They're a long way off the 2025 or their 2030 targets. They don't want to be held accountable for what they've promised and failed in the past. They're always trying to push out a new number, a greater and, more extravagant promise. And this is where we've got to with net zero 2050. I mean, we're not mugs, are we?
No, well, I'd certainly hope not, and that's certainly true with the carbon tax in 2013. That election was a referendum on the carbon tax, and it was emphatically rejected by the Australian people. The Australian people want to get out of the Paris Climate Agreement. They don't want a net zero emissions policy. And just on the Paris Climate Agreement, it's another example of what you're talking about. We know that under the agreement, Australia has committed itself to the deepest cuts to emissions on a per capita basis anywhere in the world, while at the same time China is expected to increase its emissions by over 140%. So these kind of international agreements are not in Australia's national interest. But the deeper point I want to get to here is it's not just about economics, it's not just about jobs, but this is about people's lives and their livelihoods and their future. The best available evidence shows that when the jobs go out, the drugs come in, the social pathologies come in, the family collapse comes in, the community collapse comes in. The devastation that comes from widespread unemployment can last for generations, and it can wipe out entire communities, entire regions, and this can be a very, very long-term serious issue for this country.
Look, you're spot on. I grew up in a country town. You need to get out into some country areas, policymakers, before you go down this path, because you're right, Daniel, you have the economic harm and then you have the quite significant social dislocation in this community. Is very hard to come back from. Daniel Wild, thank you for tonight. Well done to the IPA. Keep it up. We've got a long fight ahead for some common sense here.
Pleasure. Thanks, Peter.